The phone rang at 3:17 in the morning. I almost let it go to voicemail. At my age, a call at that hour usually means somebody has died, somebody is in trouble, or somebody has made a mistake they don't want to explain until morning. Then I saw the name on the screen. Connor, my grandson. I answered immediately. Connor. For a few seconds, all I heard was breathing. Then his voice came through, thin and shaky. Grandpa, I'm here. What happened? I'm at Houston Methodist. I sat up in bed. What are you doing at the hospital? I didn't call the ambulance. That sentence made me stop. What? Derek called them. He told them I tried to hurt myself. I was already reaching for my jeans. Did you? No. His voice cracked. Grandpa, I swear, I didn't do anything. He grabbed me. I hit the wall. Mom was there, but she just stood there. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, one shoe in my hand. Where is your mother now? She's here. So is Derek. Listen to me. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Just stay where you are until I get there. Okay. Then, very quietly, he said, please hurry. I'm coming. I hung up. My name is Robert Callahan. I'm 67 years old, and I spent 31 years with the Houston Police Department. For the last 12 of those years, I served as chief. I had seen plenty of bad nights. I had walked into homes where families had fallen apart in ways nobody outside the house could imagine. I had learned that the worst situations rarely began with one enormous event. Usually, they started with small things people explained away. A harsh word, a missing bank statement, a family member who suddenly stopped answering certain questions. A bruise, someone said, came from bumping into a door. I didn't know it then, but that was what I was walking into with my own family. The drive to Houston Methodist took a little over 20 minutes. When I reached the emergency department, a nurse at the desk recognized me. Chief Callahan? I'm here for my grandson, Connor Whitfield. Her expression changed. He's in the back. I'll take you. I followed her down the corridor. Connor was sitting upright on a hospital bed, still wearing the sweatpants and t-shirt he had apparently been sleeping in. His hair was messy, and there was swelling along his jaw. When he saw me, he tried to smile. He didn't quite manage it. I walked over and put my arms around him. He held onto my jacket. I'm not crazy, Grandpa. I never said you were. They think I am. Who? He looked toward the curtain. Derek and Mom. That hurt more than I expected. Carolyn was my daughter. Connor was her only child. His father, Patrick, had died of pancreatic cancer 5 years earlier. Patrick had been a good man, quiet, patient, the kind of father who could spend an entire Saturday teaching Connor how to throw a baseball and never once complain when the boy kept throwing it into the neighbor's yard. After Patrick died, Caroline changed. I understood why. She was grieving, and I tried to give her space. When Derek entered her life about a year and a half later, I told myself she deserved another chance at happiness. I didn't trust him immediately, but I didn't have a specific reason not to. That distinction mattered to me, so I kept my mouth shut. Connor pulled away from me and wiped his face. Derek has a folder, he said. A folder? He gave it to the doctor. It says I've been hurting myself for months, that I'm depressed, that I need to be admitted somewhere. Have you been hurting yourself? No. He looked directly at me. I haven't. I believed him. Not because I was his grandfather, because I knew that boy. Connor was 16, quiet, thoughtful, sometimes too reserved for his own good. He ran cross-country, drew in notebooks, and usually needed 3 invitations before admitting he wanted to come over for dinner. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't the child Derek was describing. What happened tonight? I asked. Connor swallowed. I heard Mom and Derek arguing. I couldn't hear everything. Then I heard Mom crying. He paused. I went into the hallway, and Derek was already on the phone. He said he needed an ambulance because his stepson was having a mental health crisis. Connor touched his jaw. I asked him what he was talking about. He grabbed my arm. I pulled away. He grabbed harder. He looked down. I hit the wall. And your mother? She came out of the bedroom. What did she do? Connor was silent for several seconds. Nothing. That was the part he couldn't forgive. Not the ambulance. Not even Derek. His mother had been standing there, and she hadn't moved. I sat beside him. Connor, I'm going to find out what happened, but I need you to tell me everything you remember. He nodded, then he lowered his voice. Grandpa, there's something else. I waited. Derek keeps asking Mom about Dad's life insurance. I looked at him. How long? A while. How long is a while? Connor stared at the floor. Months. Outside the room, I heard footsteps approaching. Connor looked toward the curtain. That's Derek. I stood up. For the first time that night, I realized this wasn't simply a family argument. There was something behind it. And I was going to find out what it was. Derek stopped just outside the curtain when he saw me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. He was still wearing the clothes he'd apparently left the house in. A dark polo shirt, khaki pants, and the expensive watch I'd noticed the first time Caroline introduced us. He looked tired, but not frightened. That bothered me. If your 16-year-old stepson had supposedly tried to hurt himself badly enough to require an ambulance, I'd expect a little more panic. Instead, Derek looked composed. Robert, he said, I'm glad you're here. I didn't answer that. I looked at Connor. I'm going to speak with the doctor. Connor nodded. Derek stepped inside. Connor, you need to understand that we're trying to help you. Connor looked away. I know. You've been having a difficult time lately. No, I haven't. Derek sighed. That kind of denial is exactly what worries us. I turned toward him. Use? He looked at me. Your mother and me. I wanted to ask him why he sounded like he was giving a statement at a press conference. Instead, I said, I'll be back. I walked toward the nurse's station. The attending physician was Dr. Emily Harris. She was young, maybe in her mid-30s, and had the careful expression of someone who had spent years dealing with frightened families. I understand you're Connor's grandfather, she said. Yes, and his former guardian. No, his mother is his legal guardian, she nodded. I need to understand why he was brought here. She glanced at the chart. His stepfather reported a possible self-harm incident. Did Connor confirm that? Not exactly. What did he tell you? She hesitated. He says he was physically restrained by his stepfather. I looked at her. And the bruise, we documented it. Did anyone photograph it? Yes. That gave me some relief, not because a photograph solved anything, but because someone had at least recorded what I was seeing. Did Derek give you paperwork? He did. What kind? A written history of alleged behavioral problems over the past several months. There's also a referral from a psychiatrist. Who? Dr. Marcus Webb. I recognized the name only because Derek had mentioned him once at dinner. He'd said something about having a good psychiatrist who worked with adolescents. At the time, I hadn't thought anything of it. Now I did. Can I see the referral? Dr. Harris looked uncomfortable. Mr. Callahan, I can't simply hand medical records to family members. I understand. I lowered my voice. But I need you to understand something too. My grandson is telling me a completely different story. If someone has provided documentation claiming months of dangerous behavior, I want to know what that documentation says before anybody makes a decision about putting him somewhere. She studied me. Then she said, I'll let you review the information that's appropriate for you to see. A few minutes later, I was standing at the nurse's station reading the referral. It was professionally written, almost too professionally written. It described Connor as emotionally unstable, withdrawn, increasingly hostile, and resistant to family intervention. There were dates, descriptions of supposed incidents, a recommendation for immediate psychiatric evaluation, and at the bottom was the name of a residential facility in Katy Clearview Adolescent Recovery Center. I read the letter twice. Then I noticed something that bothered me. The report described Connor as having shown a persistent decline over several months. But I'd had dinner with him 10 days earlier. He'd spent 2 hours at my house. He'd talked about school. He'd complained about his running coach. He'd asked me to help him fix an old bicycle he'd found online. Nothing about him had suggested he was in immediate danger. That didn't prove anything. I knew that. People could hide serious problems. But something wasn't fitting. I returned to Connor's room. Derek was gone. Connor looked relieved to see me. "What did they say?" "They're evaluating you." He nodded. Then he lowered his voice. "Grandpa, I need you to believe me." "I do. I didn't know how to tell Mom." "Tell me what?" He looked toward the curtain again. "Derek has been asking questions about Dad's money." "What kind of questions?" "How much was left?" "Anything else?" "When I turn 18. That caught my attention. "Why 18? Connor shrugged. "I don't know." He looked embarrassed. He asked Mom if everything would still be under her control when I turned 18. I leaned back. "Did your mother answer him?" "I don't know." He rubbed his hands together. "Sometimes they talk after they think I'm asleep." "What do you hear?" "Money stuff. Accounts. Documents." He paused. "And sometimes Derek says I'm going to ruin everything." I didn't like the sound of that, but I also knew something else. I could not walk into my daughter's marriage and declare her husband guilty based on one frightened teenager's account. That was the mistake I didn't want to make. I had already stayed too quiet. I wasn't going to overreact now and make things worse. Around 6 in the morning, Caroline finally came into the room. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red. She stopped when she saw me. "Dad." "Caroline." Neither of us moved. Then she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to ask why she had watched while Connor was being restrained. Instead, I said, "What happened?" She looked at her son. I thought he was getting worse. Connor stared at her. "Mom, I wasn't." "I know you think that. I know what happened." Caroline's face tightened. Derek appeared behind her. "Maybe this isn't the right time." I looked at him. "No, maybe it isn't." Then I looked back at my daughter. "But eventually, Caroline, we're going to have to talk about what happened tonight." She nodded slowly. As I walked out of the room, my phone vibrated. It was a message from an old colleague, Leonard Cruz, a retired deputy chief who still had a habit of answering calls at unreasonable hours. The message was short: "Call me when you can." I found something about Dr. Webb. I stood in the hospital hallway staring at those 6 words. I hadn't told Leonard about Dr. Webb yet, which meant he had started looking on his own. And suddenly, the folder on Connor's chart felt a lot more important than it had 10 minutes earlier. I stepped outside the hospital before calling Leonard. The sun was beginning to come up, but Houston still looked half asleep. The parking lot lights were on, and a delivery truck was idling near the entrance. I called him. "What did you find?" There was a pause. "About Webb?" "Yes. Nothing that proves anything by itself," Leonard said. "But there are some things you should know." I leaned against my car. "Go ahead." Marcus Webb lost his DEA registration 4 years ago. I straightened. "Why?" "Complicated situation. Prescription irregularities. No criminal conviction. He surrendered the registration voluntarily after an investigation. That should have been disclosed somewhere." It was. But most people wouldn't know to look. I rubbed my forehead. "What else?" "He has consulting relationships with several residential treatment facilities." "Clearview?" "Yes." "How much does he make?" That's where it gets interesting. Leonard gave me a figure, $47,000 the previous year, from Clearview alone. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Could be legitimate. "Absolutely," Leonard said. "That's why I'm not calling it evidence of anything. But if he's recommending a 16-year-old to a facility that pays him consulting fees, I'd want an independent evaluation before that kid spends a single night there." So would I. I hung up. My first instinct was to confront Derek. My second was to confront Caroline. I did neither. That was something I had learned during my years as a police officer. When emotions were high, the person who talked first usually gave away more than the person who waited. I went back upstairs. Connor was asleep. Caroline was sitting alone in the waiting area. Derek wasn't there. She looked up when I approached. "Where's Derek?" "He went home to get some clothes." I sat across from her. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "Caroline, did you know Derek was going to call an ambulance?" She looked down at her hands. "No. Did you believe Connor was going to hurt himself?" "I thought he might." That answer surprised me. "Why?" She took a breath. "Because things haven't been good at home." "What things?" She rubbed her thumb against her wedding ring. "Connor doesn't talk to me anymore. He's 16. That isn't all it is." She looked at me. "Sometimes he gets angry. He locks himself in his room. He stopped talking about school. He barely eats dinner with us. He ate 2 plates of chili at my house 10 days ago." A small smile crossed her face. "I know." Then it disappeared. "He doesn't act the same at home." I wanted to believe her, because she was my daughter. Because I remembered the girl she had been before Patrick died. Caroline had always been sensitive. She took criticism harder than her brothers did. When she made a mistake, she would replay it for days. After Patrick died, that tendency got worse. I wondered whether Derek had learned how to use it, but I wasn't ready to say that. "Did Derek ever tell you Connor was hurting himself?" "Yes." "When?" "Several weeks ago." "And what did you see?" "Nothing." She looked ashamed. I asked Connor, and he got angry. "That's not proof." "I know. Did you take him to a doctor?" "No." "Why?" Derek said he was handling it. I looked at her. That sentence bothered me more than anything she'd said. "Caroline, he's not Connor's father." "I know." "Then why was he handling it?" She didn't answer. A few minutes later, Derek returned. He was carrying a small overnight bag. He stopped when he saw me sitting with Caroline. "I need to talk to you," he said. "I'd rather talk here." His jaw tightened. "Robert, this is a private family matter," then explained the psychiatrist. He stared at me. "What about him? Why did you choose Dr. Webb?" "He was recommended." "By whom?" "A colleague." "Which colleague?" Derek gave me a tired smile. "I don't appreciate being interrogated in a hospital. I spent 31 years asking questions. People didn't want to answer." He looked away. Caroline suddenly stood. "Stop." Both of us looked at her. She was shaking. "Please, not here." I stopped. That was the moment I realized something. Caroline wasn't defending Derek. She was afraid of the conversation itself. I lowered my voice. "Okay." Derek picked up his bag. "I'll be in the waiting room." When he left, Caroline sat back down. "Dad, please don't make this worse." "How am I making it worse?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked. "I just don't know what to believe anymore." I reached across the table. "You don't have to decide today." She looked at me. "But you do need to start asking questions." That afternoon, I called my attorney, Sandra Park. I had worked with Sandra for 15 years. She handled my estate, my property, and the boring paperwork I had never wanted to deal with. When I explained the situation, she didn't interrupt. When I finished, she asked one question. "Who controls Patrick's life insurance?" "Caroline." "Who benefits from it?" "Connor." "How old is he?" 16. She was quiet. "Robert, I think you need to find out exactly how that money is structured." I did. Patrick's life insurance had paid out $800,000 after his death. $500,000 had gone to Caroline. $300,000 had been placed in a custodial account for Connor. Connor would gain full access at 21, with limited provisions for education beginning at 18. Derek had no direct legal ownership. But Sandra explained something I hadn't considered. If Connor were declared incapable of managing his affairs, or placed under certain forms of legal guardianship, someone else could potentially seek control over his financial interests. I sat silently. Then I remembered Connor's question. When I turned 18, it suddenly didn't sound like a random question anymore. That evening, I drove to my house. I opened the old file cabinet in my study and pulled out the copy of Patrick's estate documents. I read them twice. Then my phone rang. It was James Okafor, a retired federal financial investigator I had worked with. Years earlier. I heard you might need me, he said. I hadn't expected him to call. Who told you? Leonard. I sighed. Of course, James laughed softly. Tell me what you're worried about. I looked at Patrick's documents spread across my desk. I think someone may be trying to get control of my grandson's money. There was a pause. Then don't accuse anybody yet, James said. I wasn't planning to. Good. Let me look at the financial side first. He agreed to check what he could legally access. Before we hung up, he said, Robert? Yeah? If you're right, this probably started long before tonight. I looked at the clock. He was right. The hospital incident wasn't the beginning. It was simply the first time nobody had managed to hide it from me. James called me the next morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Robert, he said, I found something. I waited. There are 3 accounts connected to Caroline and Derek. I know about 2 joint accounts. There are 3. He explained that the 3rd account had been opened about 6 months earlier. It was described as a family trust savings account, and over several months, $62,000 had been transferred into it from Caroline's personal account. Who owns it? That's the problem, James said. It's connected to an LLC registered in Delaware. Who owns the LLC? A man named Paul Grayson. I didn't recognize the name. Who is he? I'm still checking. I leaned back in my chair. Could Derek be connected to him? Possibly. I don't have enough yet. I thanked him and hung up. For the first time, I felt angry. Not suspicious, not worried, angry. But I knew anger could make you careless. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I waited. That afternoon, Caroline came to my house. She looked exhausted. Connor was upstairs resting, so we sat at the kitchen table where we'd spent countless Sunday mornings when she was growing up. I made coffee. She didn't touch hers. Dad, she said, I think I've made a mess. I looked at her. What kind of mess? I don't know. She stared at the mug. Derek asked me to move some money into an account. He said it was for tax planning. How much? She swallowed. $62,000. I closed my eyes for a moment. Did he tell you where the money was going? He showed me documents. Did you read them? Yes. Did you understand them? She hesitated. Not really. That was Caroline. She had always been embarrassed to admit when she didn't understand financial paperwork. Derek knew that. I trusted him, she whispered. You're allowed to trust your husband. I know. She looked at me. But I think I trusted him too much. I didn't answer immediately. She continued. He kept telling me Connor was unstable. At first, it was little things. Like what? Connor didn't want to have dinner with us. That isn't instability. I know. She rubbed her eyes. He said Connor was becoming aggressive, that he was angry about the money, that Patrick's death had left him emotionally damaged. Did you believe that? Some days. She started crying. Other days, I thought maybe I was just being a terrible mother. I reached across the table. You're not a terrible mother. She shook her head. I watched him get taken away in an ambulance. You were frightened. I was standing there, Dad. Her voice dropped. I saw Derek grab him. I looked at her. What? She wiped her face. I saw it. Then why didn't you stop him? I don't know. That answer broke my heart, more than if she'd tried to defend herself. She wasn't lying. She genuinely didn't know. She told me that over the past year, Derek had gradually become the person she depended on for everything. Finances, insurance, medical appointments. Even conversations with Connor. Whenever she questioned him, he made her feel like she was missing something obvious. He never yelled at me, she said. That surprised me. He didn't? No. She shook her head. He'd just explain things until I felt stupid. I sat quietly. That was how control sometimes worked. Not through shouting, through making someone doubt their own judgment. Later that evening, James called again. This time his voice was different. Robert, I found the connection. I stood up. Between Derek and Paul Grayson? Yes. James explained that Paul Grayson was not simply a random LLC owner. He had previously worked for a financial services company where Derek had been employed, and there was another connection. Grayson had also made payments to a consulting company associated with Marcus Webb. I felt the room become very quiet. How much? Over the last year? About 30,000. From Derek? Indirectly. That distinction mattered. But the pattern was becoming harder to ignore. I called Sandra. She told me not to confront Derek yet. We need to protect Caroline and Connor first, she said. What about the money? We can address that. And the psychiatric referral? I'm already working on an independent evaluation for Connor. What about the hospital? Connor is still there. No, I brought him home. She paused. You shouldn't have done that without legal advice. I know, Robert. I know, she sighed. Then let's do this properly now. The next morning, Sandra filed for temporary protective custody and requested an independent review of Connor's medical records. It wasn't dramatic. There were no police cars outside my house, no shouting, no television cameras, just paperwork, phone calls, and several hours of waiting. That was something people don't understand about serious family problems. The biggest decisions often happen in boring rooms. On Thursday afternoon, Caroline came over again. She sat beside me on the couch. Derek wants me to come home. Are you going? I don't know. I didn't tell her what to do. That was difficult. Every part of me wanted to say, leave him, take Connor. Don't go back. But Caroline was an adult. She needed to make that decision herself. What do you want? I asked. She stared at the floor. I want my old life back. You can't have that. She looked at me. I softened my voice. But you can build another one. She started crying. I don't know how. You don't have to know today. That evening, she decided not to return home. It was the first decision she'd made without asking Derek what he thought. And strangely, it was also the first moment I saw some of the old Caroline come back. The next morning, Derek called me. His voice was calm, too calm. You're destroying my family, he said. I didn't respond. You think you're protecting Connor, but you're making things worse. I hope I'm wrong. You are. Then prove it. Silence. Then Derek said something I hadn't expected. You're going to regret getting involved. I held the phone away from my ear for a second. When I put it back, he had already hung up. I sat there staring at the screen. Until that moment, part of me had still hoped there was some explanation I hadn't considered. Now I wasn't so sure. The questions were no longer only about what had happened to Connor. They were about what Derek had been planning before that night. And by Friday afternoon, we were going to sit across from him and ask him those questions face to face. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon in Sandra's office downtown. I arrived early. Sandra was already there, along with James and Leonard. A representative from the Harris County District Attorney's Office was also present. Nobody called it an interrogation. It wasn't. Officially, it was a meeting about Connor's guardianship and the financial accounts. But everyone in that room understood there were bigger questions waiting to be answered. Derek arrived 20 minutes later with an attorney. Caroline came with me. She looked nervous. Before we went inside, she stopped me in the hallway. Dad, I turned. What if I'm wrong? About what? She looked toward the conference room. What if Derek really was trying to help Connor? I didn't answer immediately. Then the records will show that. She nodded. That was the only answer I could give her. We went inside. Derek sat across the table from me. For once, he didn't smile. Sandra began with the guardianship issue. Then she moved to the financial accounts. James placed several documents on the table. This account was opened 6 months ago, he said. Derek's attorney picked up the first page. What's the relevance? James explained the transfers. $62,000 from Caroline's personal account into an account connected to an LLC. The attorney looked at Derek. Derek didn't speak. Sandra then placed another document on the table. This company has financial connections to Paul Grayson. Derek's attorney frowned. Who is Paul Grayson? Derek finally spoke. A former colleague. James looked at him. That's correct. Then he added, he's also connected to Marcus Webb's consulting company. Caroline looked at Derek. What does that mean? Derek turned toward her. It doesn't mean anything. You told me Paul was an accountant. He is. You never told me he worked with Dr. Webb. Derek's expression changed. Because it wasn't relevant. Caroline stared at him. You told me there was no connection. I said there was no connection that mattered. That isn't what you said. Her voice was quiet. Derek leaned back. Caroline, you're overwhelmed right now. She shook her head. Please don't do that. Do what? Talk to me like I'm confused. The room went silent. I looked at my daughter. She was frightened, but she didn't look away. James opened his laptop. We also found communications between Derek and Dr. Webb. Derek's attorney immediately objected. Where did these come from? Through lawful financial and investigative channels, James said. He turned the laptop around. The first email was dated months before Connor had supposedly begun showing serious symptoms. Another followed, then another. They weren't explicit. There was no message saying, let's take Connor's money. Real life rarely works that neatly. Instead, the emails discussed Connor's behavior, his 18th birthday, the insurance account, and possible long-term treatment. Derek's attorney read several pages. His expression slowly changed. Derek remained silent. Then Caroline said something. Why did you know about his 18th birthday? Derek looked at her. Because I'm his stepfather. You weren't asking about his birthday. She swallowed. You were asking when he could access the money. Derek rubbed his forehead. I was trying to protect the family. What family? He didn't answer. Caroline looked at me. Then she looked back at him. You made me believe my son was sick. Derek's voice hardened. I never made you believe anything. You kept telling me. Because I was worried. You kept saying he was unstable. Because he was struggling, he was grieving. Caroline's voice rose for the first time. Everyone went quiet. She took a breath. He lost his father. He was 16. He was angry sometimes. He was quiet. That doesn't mean he was dangerous. Derek looked down. I could see Caroline's hands shaking. I reached across the table, but she pulled them into her lap. She wanted to finish this herself. I should have listened to him, she said. Derek finally looked at her. Caroline, I love you. She closed her eyes. That sentence hurt her. I could see it, because there had been real moments between them. Trips, dinners, anniversaries. A Christmas morning when Derek had surprised her with a necklace she'd wanted for years. That was the complicated part. People don't spend years with someone because every moment is terrible. There were good days. That's why leaving can be so difficult. Caroline opened her eyes. I loved you too. Derek didn't respond. But I don't trust you anymore. That was the moment I knew the marriage was over. Not because anyone had shouted, not because someone stormed out, because she had finally said the sentence she'd been avoiding. Derek's attorney asked for a private conversation. They stepped into the hallway. We waited. 10 minutes later, they returned. His attorney looked tired. My client intends to cooperate with the investigation. Derek stared at the table. The DA representative collected the documents. No one celebrated. There was nothing to celebrate. A family had been damaged. Even if the truth was finally coming out, nobody was getting those months back. Derek was formally charged several weeks later with financial fraud, filing a false report, and interference with child custody. Marcus Webb faced a separate investigation. The money in the joint accounts was frozen. The $62,000 was eventually recovered. Connor's custodial account remained untouched. But the legal consequences were only one part of what happened. The harder part came afterward. Caroline moved out. She rented a small house not far from mine. For the first few weeks, she called me almost every day. Sometimes she talked. Sometimes she didn't. Once, she called at 11 at night and said, Dad, I keep thinking about the first time he told me Connor was sick. What are you thinking? That I should have known. I told her something I believed. You knew what you were told. She was quiet. That doesn't make you stupid. I still feel stupid. You trusted someone who knew how to make himself sound trustworthy. She started crying. I stayed on the phone. That was all I could do. Connor was different too. He became quieter for a while. He stopped running. Then, slowly, he started again. One afternoon, I found him in my backyard, repairing the old bicycle he'd mentioned months earlier. You still want to fix that thing? I asked. He smiled. Yeah. I sat down beside him. After a few minutes, he said, Grandpa? Yeah? Do you think Mom hates herself? I looked at him. I think she feels guilty. Because she didn't believe me. Yes. He nodded. Then he went back to tightening the chain. We didn't say anything else. Sometimes silence is the only honest thing left. A few months later, the legal case moved forward. But our family was still trying to figure out what came next. And I was beginning to understand that protecting Connor had been the easy part. The harder part was helping Caroline learn how to trust her own judgment again. That would take much longer. By the time summer arrived, the house had started to feel different. Not happier exactly, just quieter. Caroline had moved into a small rental about 15 minutes from me. It wasn't anything fancy. 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a little patch of grass in the back, and a porch just large enough for 2 chairs. She liked it. She told me the first week. I forgot what it feels like to come home and not wonder who's going to be upset. I understood what she meant. Connor was doing better too. He went back to running. At first, he only ran short distances. Then he started training with his old group again. He didn't talk much about what happened at the hospital, and I didn't force him to. One evening, I found him sitting on my back steps with one of his drawing notebooks. What are you working on? He closed it. Nothing. I smiled. You've been saying that since you were 12. He laughed. It was the first completely relaxed laugh I'd heard from him in months. I sat beside him. For a while, we listened to the sprinklers in the neighbor's yard. Then he asked, Is Derek going to prison? I don't know. Do you think he deserves it? I took a breath. I think people have to live with the consequences of what they do. He nodded. Then he asked something harder. Do you think Mom is a bad person? I turned toward him. No. He looked surprised. Even after everything, yes. Why? Because making a terrible decision doesn't automatically make someone terrible. He thought about that. What about Derek? I smiled slightly. That's a question you don't need me to answer. He understood. A few weeks later, Caroline started seeing a counselor. She didn't tell me much about the sessions, and I didn't ask. That was another thing I'd learned. Sometimes helping someone means knowing when not to push. She began handling her own finances again. At first, she was nervous about everything. She called me before opening a bank statement. She called me before signing a lease. Once she called because she wasn't sure whether she should replace a broken washing machine. Dad, this one is expensive. How much? She told me. Can you afford it? Yes. Then buy the washing machine. She laughed. You're not going to tell me what kind to get. No. Why not? Because you're allowed to make your own decisions. There was silence. Then she said, Thank you. I realized she wasn't really talking about the washing machine. Months passed. The investigation continued. Derek eventually pleaded guilty to several charges. Marcus Webb lost his medical license and faced his own legal consequences. The money Caroline had transferred was recovered. Connor's $300,000 remained protected, but none of that erased what had happened. One Sunday morning, Caroline came over with breakfast. She brought too much food. As usual, Connor complained. You bought enough for 8 people. She smiled. I missed cooking for a family. That sentence stayed with me. We ate at the kitchen table. For a little while, it felt almost normal. After breakfast, Connor helped me carry the plates to the sink. Then he stopped. Grandpa? Yeah. Do you remember that night? I knew exactly which night he meant. The hospital? He nodded. Yeah, I remember. He looked at me. I thought nobody was going to believe me. I put the plate down. I know. I kept thinking maybe I was the problem. I didn't know what to say, so I told him the truth. You weren't. He nodded. Then he gave me a small smile. Thanks for coming. I smiled back. You called me. I know. You asked me to come. I know. So I came. He looked down. I thought maybe you wouldn't. That hurt, not because he doubted me, because I understood why. He had spent months watching adults explain away what he was saying. I put my hand on his shoulder. Connor, if you call me at 3 in the morning, I'll answer. He laughed. You're going to be 70 before I stop doing that. I'll still answer. That evening, after Caroline and Connor left, I stood in my kitchen, washing the last coffee cup. The house was quiet again. I thought about the first dinner I'd had with Derek. He'd been charming. He'd asked about my police career. He'd remembered what kind of coffee I drank. He'd helped Caroline carry groceries from the car. There had never been one obvious moment when I could have pointed at him and said, "That's the man who will hurt my family." It had happened slowly. That was what bothered me most. I had spent my career looking for obvious threats. But family problems don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they're hidden inside ordinary things. A financial conversation, a doctor's appointment, a teenager staying in his room, a wife saying, "I don't know," a husband saying, "I'm only trying to help." And sometimes, eventually, there is a phone call at 3:17 in the morning, a phone call that forces everyone to stop pretending nothing is wrong. I used to think protecting your family meant solving their problems for them. Now, I think it's different. Sometimes protection means listening. Sometimes it means asking uncomfortable questions. Sometimes it means accepting that someone you love has made a mistake and helping them stand back up without pretending the mistake never happened. And sometimes it means understanding that love and trust are not the same thing. I still love my daughter. I still love Connor. I don't hate Derek. I don't need to. What he did has consequences, and those consequences belong to him. My job now is simpler. On Sundays, Caroline comes over. Connor usually brings his running shoes. We eat too much food. He tells me about school. Sometimes Caroline laughs. Sometimes she gets quiet. Sometimes we talk about Patrick, and every now and then, Connor still leaves one of his drawings on my kitchen table. I never ask him to leave them. He just does. Last Sunday, after they left, I found one underneath my newspaper. It was a drawing of 3 people sitting at a kitchen table. Me, Caroline, Connor. There was nothing dramatic about it. No perfect ending. No heroic grandfather. Just 3 people sitting together. I folded the drawing carefully and put it in the same drawer where I keep old photographs. Then I turned off the kitchen light. For the first time in a long time, the silence in my house didn't feel like something missing. It felt like peace.